I mean, if there's one thing that I've learned about happiness, like more and more, the more I researched it, is there's just no magic one size fits all solution. And anybody who says like, do these 7 things, I'm like, maybe, but maybe you need to do just the opposite, or you need to do 5 and not the other 2, because people really are different.
Hey, everybody. We've had some of the most incredible guests coming to you these past couple of months. The amount of expertise and knowledge on these cutting edge topics is something we really hope that you enjoy. And if you do, it would make a huge difference to us if you could rate, review, and subscribe the podcast. It helps us to get more guests, better experts, and talk about all of the things that are really important to you. So give us a love, give us a lot of love, and don't forget to subscribe so you get all our new episodes. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Rachel, and you won't even believe who we have for you today. The happiness guru, unbelievably successful author, podcast host, and incredible entrepreneur of a woman. Gretchen Rubin is here. Thank you for being with us, Gretchen.
I'm so happy to be talking to you.
Gretchen is the host of Happier with Gretchen Rubin. With 220 million downloads, you probably have heard an episode or two. If you haven't, get on there. She's got a fantastic pod. Tons of awards and award mentions, Oprah Daily, Entrepreneur Magazine, Reader's Digest, like everybody is onto the value of this podcast. She's also a 6-time New York Times bestselling author. Her book, The Happiness Project, has been a #1 New York Times bestseller, and you've sold 3 million copies. Do you sometimes sit and just hear these things and go, what?
It's funny,
Who?
I'm sort of like, "Did that actually happen?" No, yeah. Day to day, I don't think about it much, but it's nice to hear it.
Right? Like you did all these things, so I'm going to make you sit through them.
Okay, good.
She launched the award-winning Happier app recently, and it helps people to find habit formation tools that work best for them to enhance their happiness. Like you're doing it all,
Mhm.
Gretchen. You are helping the people.
Well, my main target is myself. I always say that research is me search, and I'm always, like, trying to work on myself. Yeah, so I'm definitely a work in progress, but I love to report on everything that I learn.
What a better motivation. When
Right.
someone says, like, I started on this field because, like, it was secretly selfish for myself, I'm like, I'm listening because that is the kind of motivation that I think creates the most incredible people in their field.
Well, and also, do you find this? I mean, maybe you've experienced this yourself, is that I feel like sometimes they're full of good advice, and they'll talk and they'll talk, and I'd be like, But have you ever tried doing that yourself?" Or like, "Have you ever met a person?" Because, like, I've tried that and it doesn't work for me. Like, I'm one of these people are always surprised. Like, I've tried meditation 3 times. I mean, for months at a time, I went on a silent meditation retreat, and it just is a tool that doesn't work for me. Or keeping a gratitude journal, or like, there's just so many things where I'm like, but if you try it yourself, mileage may vary. But I feel like if you don't try it yourself, you can be full of terrific suggestions, because it all sounds so plausible.
It all does sound plausible, and at the same time, so not, because
Yes,
you're like,
exactly.
so a gratitude journal, daily water. I have to work out. I work a 60-hour a week job. I'm a mom. Like, sorry, how? How
Yeah,
again?
right.
Yeah, and I really love that, you just open up with like that there are things that you've tried that just haven't stuck for you, and that's fine. There's
Right.
no guilt behind the fact that gratitude journal works awesome for
Yeah,
her and not for you.
right.
But I do want to hear about kind of why this called to you, because you started your career as a law student
Yeah,
clerking for the Supreme Court, and
yeah.
you went on to become a happiness expert, which is like
Mm.
a really incredible journey. I've got to hear how the law student goes to being interviewed by Oprah to how to be more happier.
Right, yeah. Well, I did become a lawyer, so, like, I took the bar exam, and there I was clerking for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. But and it was sort of my transition, I would say, fell into 2 parts. So the first part was switching from law to writing. So when I was one of the things about me is that, and this has happened to me ever since I was little, is I'll get intensely interested in a subject, and I'll do a ton of research and note taking. This is just, like, a thing that I've done. And, when I was clerking for Justice O'Connor, I was out, like, on Capitol Hill, on my lunch hour, and I asked myself a rhetorical question, which is, "What am I interested in that everybody else in the world is interested in?" And I thought, "Well, power, money, fame, sex." And it was like, power, money, fame, sex. This became this subject that I just wanted to do this intense research and note taking about. So I was doing that and doing that and doing that, and it got bigger and bigger. And finally, I realized like this is the kind of thing a person would do if they were going to write a book. And maybe I can write a book. And I went to the bookstore and got a book called How to Write and Sell Your Nonfiction Book Proposal and followed the directions. And that indeed became my first book. My first book was Power, Money, Fame, Sex, User's Guide. Then I wrote 2 biographies, one of Winston Churchill, one of John F. Kennedy, and then this odd little book called Profane Waste. Um, and then I was just finishing up my book about Kennedy, and I was stuck on a city bus in the pouring rain. And I thought to myself, well, what do I want from life anyway? And I thought, well, I want to be happy. But I realized I didn't spend any time thinking about, is it possible to make yourself happier? How would I make myself happier if it's possible? And so I went, here it happened again. I went to the library, got a giant stack of books about happiness to do a lot of research and note taking about how to make my life happier. And at first it was just a project for me. And I thought to myself, oh, well, I'll just do a happiness project and figure this out. But my research got more and more interesting. And that to the point that finally I was like, wow, maybe this is my next book project. And that was my book, The Happiness Project. And the funny thing is that many people assume that The Happiness Project was my first book. But like happens to so many people, I had been working extremely hard for 10 years to become an overnight sensation. So that transition happened in 2 parts. And then it turned out that happiness is such a gigantic and multifaceted subject that I just keep going deeper and deeper into it and exploring different aspects of it. So basically I've been exploring happiness and human nature ever since.
That's so incredible. I just have to pause for a second on the fact that you were interested in something and just went and got a how-to book. Like, if that isn't the most inspirational like message that like you can do it, you can
Mhm.
do whatever you want. Wow, that that is so incredible. And I also am really glad you brought up the fact that, you know, becoming an overnight success looks nothing like that in the
Yes.
background.
Yes.
And all of that grinding
Yes.
is amazing story.
Because we're so aware of things that succeed, but we're not as aware of things that don't succeed. And so it's that old adage about don't compare your someone else's outsides to your insides. Don't compare someone else's like obvious career to like your career because there's probably a lot of things in their career that you are not seeing. All the fits and starts and failures and, things that didn't work out. And I remember saying to myself at one point, well, at this point, I'd rather fail as a writer than succeed as a lawyer. So I need to take my shot, but for me, that point was very obvious. I was fortunate that in my career, like there came a point where it was like, okay, now or never. So that was sort of helped me, make that shift as well.
Yeah, what a good way to point your life in a direction by just asking that question. Would I rather
Hmm.
be the best lawyer ever, or would I rather, fail as a writer? And that just it's just so inspirational to hear people really find their calling and then just go for it. And it's even better when they have found as much success with it as you have. Um, so happiness.
Yes.
Happiness is, I would say, generally regarded as the most important human pursuit. I think if you ask 10 out of 10 people what they want most in life, they will come back with some form of that word. But we're all searching for it. It's the number one thing we want. But what really is it?
Hmm.
Is it like comfort? Is it purpose? Do we need money for this? Like what how do we define this thing that we're all looking for?
Well, like I said, I started my career in law, so I spent an entire semester arguing about the definition of contract. And happiness is an even more elusive concept to define. And I have to say, I don't define it because I think that, like, sure, if you're an academic, you need to be very precise. But for the average person, it's like, okay, you can say joy or peace or life satisfaction or well being or whatever you want to say. I think what and but I think, like, when it's easy to get very caught up in these definitions and caught up in these arguments about it, and I'm like, I just wanna say, well, whatever it is for you, what I'm interested in is how do you get more? So, whatever it is for you, next week, next month, next year, what are the things that you could do to be happier? Given your nature, your circumstances, your interests, your values, your definition of happiness, what can you do to make yourself happier? And I think that that's much easier for people to understand because if you say to people, "What is happiness? Are you happy?" That gets very confusing. But if you say, like, given that you would want to be happier, do you think that doing XYZ is likely to make you happier? People definitely have strong beliefs about that. Now, they might have trouble executing, but they often know very well what would make them happier, or they're interested in it, or they can have that conversation much more easily because it's a much more concrete question. And also this question of, like, are you happy? Like, I just can't stand that question because I'm like, you could be happy and unhappy at the same time. Sometimes the things that make you happy in the long run make you unhappy in the short run. Sometimes, I mean, it's just like, how do you measure it? Like, according to what? So I just find that to be really unhelpful. But I'm like, if I okay, for 2025, I've decided I'm gonna read for 25 minutes in 2025. This is an annual challenge that we do every year on the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. We give ourselves a challenge like that. And I'm like, do I think that if I read consistently for 25 minutes every day in 2025, is that gonna make me happier? And I'm like, yes, it will. And whatever it means to be happy, you know? So I find it easier to think about it that way. Some people love arguing about definitions. I went to law school with many of those people. But I think that this version works well for a lot of, just ordinary people thinking about their lives.
Totally. And I love that idea of rather than sort of chasing happiness.
Yes, exactly.
Ah,
Yeah, I love uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
right, like it's like
It's a
okay, we don't know
process.
what that is and it
Yep.
seems very far away and very elusive, but the thing that seems very now and very possible is how can I be happier?
Right. It's the process. It's like moving towards the destination without really worrying about what that is exactly. Yeah.
Oh, some of us have a lot of hard times with that.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think it's a very useful thing to ponder. I myself, again, some people find that very exciting. And then if you're an academic studying happiness, you need to, like, have a term that people can agree on so that you know that you're comparing an apple to an apple and not an apple to an orange. But in everyday life, it can get kind of tedious.
I don't know. I don't know that we can really ever compare apple to apples when it comes to humans and all the
Well,
nuances.
that is a very good I mean, if there's one thing that I've learned about happiness, like, more and more the more I researched it, is there's just no magic one size fits all solution. And anybody who says, like, "Do these 7 things," I'm like, "Maybe." But maybe you need to do just the opposite, or you need to do 5 and not the other 2 because people really are different. Even something like a to-do list, right? What is more basic and universally recommended than a to-do list? But I will tell you, there are many people, the minute something's on a to-do list, they don't wanna do it. And so if they wanna, like, figure out how to get things done for themselves, they can do it, but the to-do list is not a tool that works for them. And so instead of saying, "Well, what's wrong with me? Everybody else uses a to-do list. Why do I resist my to-do list?" You say, "Okay, doesn't work for me. Let me try a different way."
Oh, the possibilities that open with radical acceptance is just like, man, there's no more roadblocks when
Yes.
you can just say, like, maybe my way is the best way.
Right. Right.
But
Exactly.
knowing what that is, yeah, that's the really so because of its extreme importance in sort of our pursuit in our life. Sometimes we feel, I think, overwhelmed with the amount of power that we possess in this area. Um, is happiness truly under our control,
Mm,
or does it have like a relationship to circumstances that are out of our control? Because, like, what if bad stuff happens? How
yes,
are we
yeah.
supposed to be happy?
Well, research shows that about 50% of people's happiness is genetically determined. So some people are born Tiggers and some people are born Eeyores, and that's pretty much genetically hardwired. Then there's about 10 to 20% that's something called life circumstances. So that's age, health, income, marital status, education, things like that. And then all the rest is very much subject to our conscious thoughts and actions. So what I focus on is what can you do given how you were hardwired from birth and the circumstances in which you find yourself to make yourself happier, healthier, more productive, more creative, like starting tomorrow, just like within your own power. But you're exactly right. We know this, that people are very influenced by their circumstances, and they're and some people are just come into the world with a different setting, and so I think part of it is understanding like how much you can influence it. I think the way to think about it is like everybody has a kind of a natural range. So my range might be 4 to 7, your range might be 7 to 10. But whoever we are, like, can we do things that so that we're up at the top of our range instead of letting ourselves drift down to the bottom of our range? So we might not all end up as the way I think of like Dick Van Dyke, like skipping down the sidewalk, like that might not be you, but you can still do the things you can do so that you're as happy as you can be, given who you are.
Quick interruption, guys. We are always talking about the importance of community to help you along your journey, to keep you motivated, to surround you with like minded people. And we have a massive, massive community to do just that. If you haven't already, get in our fitness group on Facebook, Fitness Programming by CVG. Get on our app, CVG Nation. We've got hundreds of thousands of women on there who are just waiting to cheer you on. And we cannot wait to meet you. Get with us on our channels. We love to see you there. Thinking of happiness as a genetic predisposition is so interesting and wild to me.
Mm,
Um, I I don't think many people think of their genetics when they think of their overall potential for happiness. And I love
mm,
that you just discussed that like range and kind of
mhm.
understanding yourself and trying to stay towards the top of your range and the bottom, and that we're all not going to be Dick Van Dyke, and maybe that's not the goal.
Right. Well, I think this comes up a lot in families or in like couples because sometimes you'll have a person who's like naturally like an 8 or a 9, and they have a child who's like naturally like a 7 or an 8, and they like want that child to like bring it, and it's like, they don't want to change. Like that is like you've got to accept the fact that there is a range, or like if you're in a couple, what you are. And then sometimes the people who are kind of lower on that range will say to people, well, you're not being realistic, or you got to like calm down, or you're setting yourself up for disappointment because you get so excited about things. It's like, but people just bring a different kind of attitude and energy into the world. And so again, it's like, given who you are, do the best make the most of it, but accept, like, you know, I think we want to accept ourselves and expect more from ourselves. And so each of us has to decide for ourselves, where am I just accepting, like, hey, be Gretchen. Like, you get what you get and you don't get upset. And then the other one is like, I can really push myself out of my comfort zone. I can really expect more from myself. This is something that is realistic for me. This is the kind of thing that would work for me. And each of us, that's those two things are intention, and each one of us has to figure that out for ourselves.
Yes, and what a balancing act,
Yes, right?
because too much of one and too much of the other, I think
Yes.
leads people to feel unfulfilled.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Well, here's something that people might find useful, as they're thinking about how to set themselves up to achieve their aims, like whether it's like a New Year's resolution or it's just something that, a lot of us have a few things that are like, oh my gosh, I know I would be happier if I did XYZ. And for some reason, I'm just It's just not sticking. So this is so I wrote a book called Better Than Before. That's the 21 strategies that people can use to make or break their habits. And sometimes people are like, 21 is too many. Give me the 3 big ones. And I'm like, well, it just depends on you. Like we've been talking about, like everybody has a different set that works for them. So this framework helps you figure out what you need to do to set yourself up for success. Not what one needs to do, but what like you need to do to set yourself up for success. So this is a framework. It's called the 4 tendencies because it divides people into 4 categories: upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. And I'll explain it really quick, but here's the thing. Most people know what they are just from me describing it very
Yep.
quickly. We could do Game of Thrones characters, we could do characters from The Office. Like these are really obvious once you know the framework, but there is a quiz if you want to like get an answer and a report that tells you what to do. You just go to gretchenrubin.com/quiz and it's like, I don't know, 3.5 million people have taken that quiz and it's free and it's fast. But again, I'll just describe it really quickly and a lot of people, they get it right away. Okay. So this framework looks at how you respond to expectations. And all of us face 2 kinds of expectations: outer expectations, like a work deadline, and inner expectations, like your own desire to get back into meditation. So depending on whether you meet or resist outer and inner expectations, that's what makes you an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, or a rebel. So upholders are people who readily meet outer and inner expectations. So these are the people who keep the New Year's resolution and meet the work deadline without much fuss. They tend to love to-do lists, calendars, execution. They don't need a lot of supervision or accountability. They can be a little bit rigid. I can say that because I'm an upholder myself. There is definitely kind of a coldness and rigidity to the upholder framework. And their motto is, discipline is my freedom. Then there are questioners. I'm married to a questioner. Questioners question all the expectations. They'll do something if they think it makes sense. They need reasons, justifications, rationale. They're making everything an inner expectation. If something makes sense to them, they'll do it no problem. If it fails their sense of what makes sense, they'll push back. They're often told that they ask too many questions. Um, so their motto is, I'll comply if you convince me why. Then there are obligers. This is the biggest tendency for both men and women. So you either are an obliger or you have many obligers in your life. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. So these are the people who say things like, why is it that I can keep my promises to everybody else, but I don't keep my promises to myself? Why is it that I never let anybody down at work, but I can't come through for myself? Why can't I take time for self-care? Why can't I make myself a priority? So here's the secret for obligers. If you're an obliger and you're having trouble meeting an inner expectation, the secret is to have a system of outer accountability. You want to read more? Join a book group that expects you to read the book. If you want to exercise, you have to work out with a trainer, work out with a friend who's going to be annoyed if you don't show up, raise money for a charity, take your dog for a run, who's going to be so disappointed if he doesn't get to go for a run. Think of your duty to be a role model for somebody else. Whatever it is, there's a million ways to create outer accountability once you realize that that is what you need. Obligers make great leaders, great team members, great friends, great family members, because these are the people that are the most likely to come through for others. So they're like extraordinary, but they often let themselves down. So they have to have that outer accountability. Their motto is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. And then finally, rebel. Rebel is the smallest tendency, but it is a very conspicuous tendency. And rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. They can do anything they want to do, but if you ask or tell them to do something, they're very likely to resist. And typically, they don't even tell themselves what to do. Like, they don't sign up for the 10 a.m. woodworking class on Saturday because they think, I don't know what I'm going to want to do on Saturday. And just the idea that someone's asking me to show up is going to make me not want to go. So their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. So those are the 4 tendencies. Again, you go to gretchenrubin.com/quiz to get your answer. If people don't know what they are, I'm like, well, chances are you're an obliger because that is the biggest tendency. And if you're thinking to yourself, I'm all these things, that is a sign that you're a questioner, because you're thinking, in some circumstances, I act like a rebel. In some circumstances, I act like an upholder. And why are you doing that? Because that's why it makes sense in that circumstance.
That's so, I mean, I not only categorize myself, but I categorize pretty much all of my close loved ones as
Okay, so what are you?
upholder.
I am too,
Yes,
right?
yes. And I'm also married to a questioner. Do we find each other? Is that what's happening?
Well, I mean, I have to say I'm partial to this combination since that's my combination, but I do think that they make a really good pairing because they both meet inner expectations, and so there's a very high tolerance for like, "Hey, I gotta go, train for the marathon, so I'm gonna be gone for 7 hours." Like, both a questioner and an upholder would understand that. Like,
Yes,
they understand those expectations, where sometimes, like, if you have an obliger and upholder, the obliger's like, "Well, I would stay home. I would skip the training for you because your family's in town and I know that's important to you. I would do that for you. So I'm kind of hurt that you're not doing that for me." Where it's a questioner to be like, "Nah, you got to train for the marathon." Um, a really the pairing that you often see almost kind of inevitably is if one person is a rebel, either in like romance or like say in the workplace. If one person's a rebel, almost always the other person in the team is an obliger. That is almost always the case. So if you see a rebel, you want to look for obligers around them because upholders and questioners sometimes do have more trouble um, relating to rebels like in an intense way.
sure. So they'll distance themselves. Yeah, no, I totally, wow. It's so I love the work of thinking about yourself, thinking about your tendencies and identifying yourself in certain ways. And I also love the idea of maybe not so much fighting against that, because oftentimes when people
Absolutely.
categorize themselves, they go like, yeah, but I don't want to be that.
Right. Yes.
I'd rather be the other one,
Yeah.
it's grass is greener. But kind of sitting with that and saying, how can I take what I know about myself and maximize that
Yes.
rather than try to swim upstream against it, which
Yes.
always seems to end poorly.
No, absolutely. And sometimes people will say to me, "Well, I don't want to be X, I want to be Y." And my answer is always like, "Look, is it possible to change your fundamental nature? Probably not, and if it is possible, it's really, really hard, but instead, exactly what you're saying, work with yourself and say, "I wanna achieve a certain aim. What's the most natural and effortless way for me to do that?" Because we can all get to the top of the mountain, but we might have to take different roads there, and sometimes people are really hard on themselves. They're like, "What's wrong with me? I'm not a grown-up." Like, sometimes rebels will say this, they're like, "Everybody else can use a to-do list," or "Everybody else says, just put it on the calendar, but when I put it on the calendar, I don't wanna do it." And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you. That's very common. Many people experience that, and there's all kinds of workarounds that other people have discovered that you can use. You can do what you want, but do it in the way that's right for you. And similarly, obligers sometimes they feel like there's something kind of weak about needing outer accountability, or they think it's kind of like training wheels. Like, oh, I'll use outer accountability now, but of course, at some point, I should be able to like kick free from it and just not need it. And I'm like, in my observation, that is not the case. Obligers need outer accountability all along the way. But who cares? This is the biggest tendency. There's a bazillion ways to create outer accountability. Just use it for yourself. You do not need to change. There's nothing wrong with you. There's all sorts of people in the same boat. And so, but again, it's like, and it's what that's one of the things that I love so much about this framework is so often people are like, oh my gosh, like once I realized like how to put the right puzzle piece in, now I can do all these things that felt I was so frustrated because I was just throwing spaghetti against the wall or thinking like, well, if this doesn't work, I'll just try to do it more and harder. And then it just would never work. But now I'm trying this different way. Like with rebels, a lot of things that work for other people don't work for rebels. They have to do things in the rebel way. Or like upholders. I gotta say, as an upholder, I hadn't invented this framework when I wrote the Happiness Project. And truly, I will confess, when I wrote the Happiness Project, I thought, well, look, I'll just come up with the right answer. And like that will be, and then everybody can just use what I learned. It's like, what was I thinking? Obviously. Like, this is an upholder. we're a small fringe community. I mean, I
Yes.
remember when I came up with this and I said to my husband, I realized I'm part of this like small extreme personality type. And he was like, you think? Because obviously we are, but we sort of, it's, you don't, you just think everybody's kind of more or less the same, or they're more or less like you. And they're just not. There's just things that work really well. Oh, the strategy of scheduling works really well for some people, and for rebels can be exactly counterproductive. For questioners, the strategy of clarity is super important. For others, sometimes it's like they like to know why they're supposed to do something, but it actually doesn't really make them more likely to do something. So if you have a questioner doctor who is like, hey, I am just going to sit here with you and give you every bit of data about why you need to start exercising. And that will make you start exercising because you're going to understand why. It's not enough for a lot of people. It's not that they want to do something random or that's like not proven, but just knowing the information, having the why is not going to actually change their behavior. They need to do something else. That is fine.
I think everybody had one collective big sigh of relief that we don't actually need to treat it like, these are training wheel things until I get better, until I
Right.
become the other one, until I become
No,
the best
no.
one.
Stay what
Um,
you are.
so that's a big relief. And then what I heard is that we need to stop trying to change people
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
understand that what makes you tick and what works for you does not need to be superimposed on their life and says, see, this is the way to do it.
Yeah,
um, like you
that's so
said,
true.
with the upholders kind of looking at other groups as like, well, why do you need outside accountability? That
Yes.
seems kind of like, isn't that sort of a weak tendency? Why can't you just tell yourself to do it?
Well, I'll give you an example where this would come up with me. So there's a lot of people where I would say, "Oh, you should do this," or like, "I'm trying to do this." And people would say, they would be like, "Oh, I do that, but I do it like for my kids." Like a friend of mine said, like, I've been trying, my sister calls me a happiness bully because I can get intense if I think there's a way for you to get happier. So I have a really close friend who never exercised. She had like a lot of muscle pain, and I was like trying to get her to do high intensity strength training because I knew she would just feel so much better. And then she said to me, "Well, I realized like I have 3 little kids. I have to do this because like I can't be running around and be the kind of mother that I want to be if I'm having all this pain." And here's the thing. As an upholder, I want to say, who cares?
Right,
It doesn't matter about your kids. You
right.
should do this for you. You don't need to invoke them, but she's an obliger. So for her, that's a very, very powerful idea. I should not get in the way of that idea for her. I shouldn't argue against it or try to undermine that argument for herself. For her, she's doing what she needs to do. She's invoking accountability. She's saying, I need to do this so that I can be the kind of mother for my children that I want to be. Why would I say, "Oh, that doesn't matter. That's not important. Do it for yourself." That's an upholder idea,
Yes.
which is fine for me, but why would I tell her that, like, her thinking is wrong? Like, her thinking is right for her and actually very powerful for her.
Far more powerful than your thinking superimposed on her.
Oh, 100%. My thinking, if I keep saying that to her, that I might actually get in her way. This is something that you see with rebels all the time because sometimes people trying to encourage rebels or help rebels will actually make them less likely to do it. For instance, a friend of mine, classic mistake. Her elderly father had been like really bad about like taking medication and doing everything he's supposed to do, but finally he started taking his blood pressure medication. And she said to him, "I'm so glad that finally you're following your doctor's orders." And he stopped because he's like, "Nobody tells me what to do. If you
Oh.
think that I'm just doing this because some doctor told me to do it, I'm not going to." Now, I don't wanna make it sound like rebels are, like, irrational or whatever, but that's just an example of, like, how you can get in someone's head, you know? And sometimes I've found with the tendencies, like, very subtle shifts in language can make a very big difference in how people are able to, like, stick to a behavior over time because it really does matter. Here's a very, I think, poignant example. So I knew a guy grew up, played soccer, loved playing soccer as a little kid, played goalie, and then they got a new coach, and the new coach came in and was like, "Okay, here are the drills." And so my friend, the kid, goes up to him and says, "Well, I don't think I should do those drills. I think that I should have different drills because I'm a goalie," right? Because what is a questioner thinking? Customize, maximize, like, what's the best thing for me? I don't want this cookie cutter thing. I've got a completely different position. Now, imagine if that coach had said, "Hey, I get it. You've got a different position, but I've studied the training regimens of all the top teams, and what I have found is the same skills are important no matter what you play, and that's speed, accuracy. Like, you do it, don't worry, it's going to work for you as a goalie." But the coach didn't say that. He said, "Look, kid, I'm the coach and everybody on my team does the same drills." And so my friend quit because he's like, "That doesn't make any sense. Why am I going to waste my time doing a bunch of different drills that don't apply to me as a goalie?" And so he lost out on soccer. He quit soccer because of one, like, two sentences that coach said. And so I think when we understand how people are just going through the world with, like, they're looking for slightly different things, they respond to slightly different messages, and understand that for ourselves, where somebody might say something to us where it's like, why in the world are you thinking that? Well, they just have a different perspective, and no one's right and no one's wrong and no one's better and no one's worse. It's just a fact of understanding how people come from different places.
I love that example because not only do I think it opens up a dialogue about interacting with different kinds of people and how important our interactions can be to the
Yes.
happiness of each other, but also, that's just a kid, but let's say we can arm this person in the future with knowledge of who they are and why
Yes.
they do what they do. Maybe this kid in another instance goes up after practice and says, "I really just need to know why, because I thrive when I know why."
1,000%. This is huge because, and you put your finger right on it. When you know your own tendency, you're more able to, like, collaborate with other people or to communicate effectively. And this is absolutely true, like, in a meeting. Like, often questioners can drain and overwhelm other people with their constant questioning. They can make people feel defensive. That if someone's thin-skinned, they may feel like, okay, this person's questioning my judgment or undermining my authority. And one of the things that questioners needs to learn is, how do I ask questions in a way that seems constructive? So how do I say something like, "Hey, I know we're implementing this new software and I'm just sort of not getting it. Like, if you could explain to me what the thinking is behind this choice, I think I would be much more effective in understanding, like, how to change my work process to take advantage of it." That's a very different thing to say to your boss than, "Can you just explain to me, like, what this seemingly completely arbitrary update is supposed to accomplish?" Like, they might be thinking the same thing, but they need to learn how to, like, come into it collaboratively. And same thing with upholders, right? Like, I used to say things like, "Look, do your own work in your own way. I don't wanna be your babysitter, like, do whatever works for you." And I would think, "Oh, I'm giving people freedom." But an obliger who's like, "Hey, I need a deadline. Hey, I need accountability." Telling somebody, "I don't need to be your babysitter," that's cold, and that's not helpful. Now that I understand that some people are obligers, I communicate with them in a very different way so that we, like, can achieve our aims together so much more constructively.
I love that, and not thinking of that as a weakness or an eye
No.
roll, as
No.
sometimes
Yes.
we can tend to do. Oh, like,
Yes.
oh, I have to
You c
babysit you. Why can't
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
not thinking of it that way, and just thinking of, like, this is how to maximize this person's what they
Yes.
can give, and why wouldn't
Yes.
I? What does it matter which way we get to the top of the mountain as long as we get there?
Exactly. Exactly, and I think people do have this judgment, like, that some ways are better, that something is the right way, and so, they kind of don't wanna acknowledge the truth about themselves, but again, it's like, you don't need to change, just try a different way. And, it's funny with obligers and accountability. Even with accountability, there's all different obligers are very different and what kind of accountability works for them. So for, like, some obligers, paying for something really makes them feel like they have to do it. And then other obligers, it's almost like they feel like they're off the hook. Like, "Oh, I paid for that exercise session, But if I don't go, the trainer still gets paid and they get the time back, so it's okay if I don't go. I'm like, "Okay, so for you, paying doesn't work." Some people can feel obligated, like, to an automated, message from an app, but then sometimes people need a real person. Some people have, like, what I would almost call imaginative accountability, like, my future self. Oh my gosh, my future self, if I come to the end of 2025 and I still haven't done this, my future self is gonna be so disappointed. I have to do it for my future self. Um, or, I need to be a role model for other people. I wanna put this behavior out into the world. These are almost more imaginative forms of accountability. For some people, they're very powerful. Some people really need somebody to check on them. They do much better with, like, an actual accountability partner. Like, my sister did this. She wanted to walk 10,000 steps a day, so she and a friend, it's like every day, they're like, "I'm at 5,000. Where are you? I'm at 6,500." Or, and they do that, and it holds them accountable, but that's an actual person. So again, there's all kinds of varieties even within a tendency. Um, but once you crack that code, it's so much easier to move forward.
So, you already know we make the best workout gear, but one of our best products, our highest rated product on our website, is actually our collagen. If you have not heard about Glow Up by CVG, you are missing out. There is almost 700 five-star reviews on this product because it is such an amazing supplement. Actually, looking at it today, there are only 2 one-stars that were meant to be 5 stars. They love the product, they hit the wrong amount of stars. This is one of our most popular products for a reason. It dissolves like no other collagen. It's type 1 and 3. You're gonna have healthier skin, better joint mobility. Everything about this collagen makes it easy to put into your daily routine. So if you haven't tried Glow Up, get on cvg.com and make sure to add it to cart today. It's our best product. Oh, I love that. And I really love that you even broke down the nuances of once you've categorized yourself, you might be these different tendencies within that tendency is like a
Yes.
really, again, it's just a freeing feeling because you can customize this right
Yes.
down to you. And I love that idea. Um, I really want to talk about transitions for a second because I think that
Yes.
this is huge, and I know you've been going through, your own transition.
Yes. Empty nest, which
It's
I'm rebranding the open door because I like that phrase better
I
than
love
empty
I saw that
nest.
on your Instagram. I was like,
Yeah,
yes, stealing that, taking it. I only have a 7-year-old, but I'm preparing.
I
I'm a
know.
preparer.
Yeah.
So I just when we get to these crossroads and these transitions, and we know this about human nature because it starts right with toddlers. Like you can't change what we're doing right now, even if it's to go do something even better. It's hard to
Yes.
transition. It's
Yes.
hard for our brains. And I want to talk about, happiness during transitions because
Mhm.
so often we equate happiness with comfort, and
Mhm.
transitions are not comfortable.
Mhm.
What what are we doing about if we feel that a transition has affected our happiness in a negative way?
Mhm.
And how are we kind of seamlessly going through these transitions and finding new happiness?
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I mean, no ending, no beginning, and that's kind of comforting, but transitions are very disruptive and sometimes they do bring sorrow with them. Sometimes there are changes that, a parent dies and that leads to a huge change in kind of the energy of your family or the kind of the logistics of your family, and that just can, it's not like there's not a glass half full, half empty. But so here are the 2 things I would say, it just kind of at the most basic level if somebody is grappling with a transition. One is think about your body. Your physical experience is always gonna color your emotional experience, and sometimes when we're going through a transition, we sort of, like, throw ourselves into it, and we might be just, like, letting ourselves get overstimulated. So if you're going through a time like that, I would pay special attention to getting enough sleep. Most adults need at least 7 hours of sleep. You might need to like set an alarm to help you like start moving towards bed at the right time. A lot of times we wait until we feel sleepy to go to bed. But then like if you're like let's say you're overwhelmed, so you're like, okay, to calm myself, I'm going to start like rewatching episodes of, The Office or something, and then you just get caught up into it, and 3 hours later, so you want to like maybe set an alarm. You want to think about getting some exercise, like even 20 minutes a walk a day, can do huge things for you. Getting up and moving around throughout the day just to get your blood moving. If you can go out in the sunlight, that is great, especially early morning light. That helps to like reset your body clock. It puts you on the circadian rhythm in all kinds of subtle ways that we don't really understand. So that's very important. It will also help you sleep better. Exercise and morning light will help you regulate your sleep. So those things all work together. You want to make sure that you don't let yourself like get too hungry or too thirsty. And for a lot of people, if you're going through a transition, and I wrote a whole funny little book called Outer Order, Inner Calm about this. There is something, not for everyone. Some people are truly clutter blind. But for many people, outer order gives them a feeling of inner calm. So if you're going through a big transition, you might want to just take time to like create more outer order in your environment. That tends to give people a disproportionate sense of energy and peace. Like a friend of mine said, I finally cleaned out my fridge and now I know I can switch careers. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, and it's something that you can control, and so there's something about like maybe just going through your pantry or like going through your closet, or you know, donating all those old coats you've been meaning to donate. Just it makes you feel lighter and freer, and it is something that you can do during a time of transition. It's sort of an outlet. Oh, that's another thing about exercise, is that if you're in a transition that is leaving you kind of jittery and kind of wired feeling, exercise is a way to like release that energy in a positive way, rather than just kind of feeling like you're bouncing off the walls and out of your skin. So one is to think about your body. The other thing is, and maybe do something. I wrote a book, Life in 5 Senses, about 5 senses. Like I just did this post about like, should adults have teddy bears? Kind of as a joke, but everybody's like, oh my gosh, let's start the trend of adult teddy bears, because there is something like maybe just like a soft, warm blanket that you just love to dig your fingers into, that just makes you feel warm, something soft to hold, or just even something in your hand. Like when I'm stressed out, I'll often hold a pen. Just having something in my hand kind of makes me feel grounded. But the other thing I would say is think about relationships. Ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists agree that to be happier, we need to have strong, enduring bonds. And if you're going through a transition, you want to think about, okay, how can I deepen my relationships and really draw on my deep relationships, my long-standing relationships, my closest relationships, family and friends? And then also, as I'm going through this transition, are there ways that I can broaden my relationships? Are there new, can I make an acquaintance? Can I turn an acquaintance into a friend? Can I reconnect with a dormant friendship? Is there a way for me to feel like, because we get so much energy from connecting with other people, it takes time and energy for sure. But that really is going to give us that feeling of comfort. This is true even for introverts. They also get energy from social connection, even though it might like look very different than it does for an extrovert. And also, like when they do studies of like who's happy at work, people who are happier at work are people who have a friend at work. When they say, are you happy? People who have more close relationships report feeling happier. And even something like having a little conversation with the drugstore clerk, or like a little encounter with a neighbor, or just like a few minutes of chit chat by the coffee machine at work, we get kind of these social connections help us to feel energized. So you want to think about your body and you want to think about your relationships. And that's a good place to start when you're going through if you're struggling with kind of a hard transition.
That's such great and important advice. And I think sometimes, I personally have pegged myself as a withdrawer when
It's
during
very
transition.
tempting to do.
It's the opposite of what you need to do, and just hearing that out loud, during difficult transitions, just to seek out your people is just, that's it's a really important thing, I think, to think about when you are saying, what do I want out of this transition? Do I want to just kind of come in my own self and just weather this storm, or do I want to like be driving the ship through it?
Well, here's research that I learned that I was very surprised by. I thought it was very counterintuitive, but it's really helpful to keep in mind that when people are lonely, they tend to be more defensive, more prickly, more irritable. So they're more difficult. And this surprised me because I thought, well, I would think if you're lonely, you're looking for that social relationship. So you're going to be warmer, you're going to be less judgmental, you're going to be more tolerant, you're going to be like seeking connection. But actually loneliness is so hard for us. Like it's a real happiness challenge. We are social creatures, we're among the most social creatures on the planet. We really rely on social connections for our happiness. And if you're feeling lonely, that's very, very hard to manage. And so it has this kind of it can lead you in this downward spiral because of course you're going to be less inviting to other people if you're defensive, intolerant, irritable, like, and so if you're feeling that way, really try to notice it and think, okay, I'm feeling lonely. I want to let me take a moment and really make sure that I am showing people that I'm open to relationships, that I'm interested in engaging, that I'm not like a person who's always like annoyed and complaining or difficult. But again, it can be hard because when you're feeling lonely, you're kind of feeling lousy and you want other people to come to you and offer their comfort and their friendship. But if they don't know you, they just might walk away. And so it's a really good thing to know, like if you're like, let's say you're dealing with moving to a new city, right? That's a huge challenge for a lot of adults. And you're like needing to build up a social network. Like, remember, like, okay, am I like putting this, like, am I showing that I'm open to relationships and friendships and connection through my behavior and my words?
Oh, I love that. I love that advice. And I think that we can all just do so much with that. I want to talk about negativity for a second because you talked a little bit about, the genetic predisposition towards, a Tigger or an Eeyore. And I think that a lot of people consider negativity to be like the anti happiness, right? We need to
Mm.
get rid of all the negativity and then we can
Mm-hmm.
be happy. Um,
Mm.
but it's a weird thing because cognitively, there are conditions like the negativity bias and
Yep.
loss aversion.
Yep.
And it's almost like our brain is hardwired to feel negative events more intensely than it
Absolutely.
feels positive
Yes.
ones. So like,
Yeah.
are we like destined to be negative, and should we be like actively fighting against this? Is this our default human setting?
Mm.
And can we really achieve happiness despite our brain kind of working this way?
Well, I think you're exactly right. Because of that, and like if you look at people who are sort of daydreaming, their thoughts tend to sort of drift negatively. So I think you're right that there's kind of this like human propensity to like go down. So I think that's part of like why there is so much talk about like cultivating mindsets or trying, like we kind of have to go out of our way to make sure that we're like pointed in the positive direction. But I also want to emphasize like there's a real place for negative emotions in a happy life. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, well, like get rid of all the negativity and then like we'll all be perfectly happy. But that's not realistic. And it's not even a good life. Like that, we don't want that. And so one of the reasons that we experience negative emotions is that they are like it's like a flashing warning sign that something needs to change. Like we were talking about loneliness. Loneliness is a negative emotion, but it's supposed to say to you like, hey, you need to make some friends. Like call your college roommate for goodness sake, whatever.
Right.
Or guilt is telling us you're doing something wrong. You're not living up to your values. You need to change your ways. That can be really positive. Now, of course, all of these things can spiral out of control and become negative. Every medicine can become poison, but they are meant to help us. A negative emotion that I think is extraordinarily instructive is envy. Like we don't like to admit that we envy people, and sometimes we even like twist ourselves in knots to pretend that we don't feel envy. But envy is actually really helpful because, like, if I really envy somebody who's taking a lot of wonderful trips, could say to myself, like, well, why am I? Maybe I could take some wonderful trips. Like, maybe I'm just like, I just am managing my calendar week to week to week, and I'm not thinking ahead to say, okay, how can I clear out a long weekend so I can like go on that fabulous trip that I've been wanting to take? Or as you mentioned, like I'm in the empty nest phase, and somebody said to me, I really envy my son. Like he's in college and he just feels like he's learning so much and he's making so many friends, and I don't have any fun. And I'm like, yeah, man, Get some fun in your life. You need to learn how to do something new. You need to how to make some new friends. Like that envy really showed him what he was missing. So instead of trying to pretend like we don't feel it, say to ourselves, okay, do I need to expect more from myself? Are there ways that I'm behaving badly? Or, gosh, I'm feeling guilty about my spending. Okay, what am I going to do about it? I don't want to feel guilty. So the secret isn't to eliminate the guilt, maybe. The secret is to say, like, okay, I want to behave in a way that I feel good about. So let me learn from that guilt and think, okay, I'm not going to use credit cards, or I'm, whatever it might be. I'm going to track my spending every day. So there's a real place for negative emotions, but as long as they're working for us in a useful way, and like we're harnessing them in a useful way and not letting them just sort of like, sometimes people have rumination where they just like have circling negative thoughts that are just bringing them down, but they're not moving them forward. Like that's something to avoid. But one way to avoid it is like, okay, how can you take action? Because often action is the antidote to that kind of anxiety. Once you take action, your anxiety may very well start to lessen because you feel like you're seeing a way forward for yourself.
Yes, action is so the way out of rumination and that like super painful loop of this is not who I want to be, but now I'm being negative. Push that away, don't be negative. But I'm still unhappy with this. And in that circle with no action, it just can get so I have personally seen with people in my life being stuck in that circle can just be debilitating to their
Yeah.
happiness.
Here's a fun hack that sometimes works for people in that situation. And it sounds funny, but it's scheduled time to worry. So instead of saying like, don't worry, you say, I'm going to schedule time to worry. And if it's outside the time, I don't need to worry because I have my time set aside for worry. Now, maybe it's once a week. Maybe you've got a lot in your mind and you're like, I want to worry once a day. But when you do it, it's like you pick a time when you feel like energized and comforted. So like it's not 11 p.m. at night or 3 a.m. or 6:30 a.m., but
You
like
hear
maybe
that,
it's a
guys? It's not
yeah.
3 a.m.,
Yeah,
guys. That's
right.
not the
Right.
time
Oh,
to
I have a
worry.
tip for that too. If you're awakened, side note, if you're awakened in the middle of the night with racing thoughts, write them down, because one of the reasons that your mind races is because your brain is saying, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. This is important. Don't forget. If you write it down, the brain is kind of like, oh, okay, this is memorialized. I don't need to hold on to it. So really like you might, you don't write it down, and that may help it. But then scheduling time to worry. So you do it at a time when you feel energetic, composed. And I think it's really helpful to have a pen and paper. So you're worrying. And often when we worry, we think, oh my God, I need to find that phone number, or, oh, I need to ask X person to give me Y person's address. Or I keep thinking of things I need to get, I need to get done. So write them down so that you feel like, okay. And that's a constructive thing to do, is to just write them down. But then when you're not in that period, you say, I'm not going to worry right now. I'll worry about that at 2 p.m. That's when I'm gonna worry about it. Because you're not because when people are just trying to deny the worry, it keeps coming back. But when you schedule time to worry, it has its place. And then you're kind of prepared for it and can use it constructively, rather than just having it wash over you kind of throughout the day in a way that feels draining and overwhelming, and also kind of useless, because you're not really in a position where you're like, oh, I keep thinking I need to find that phone number. Oh, I gotta remember to do that. And then you're like, but now you're in the drugstore line. So then you're doing it, then you forget, oh, it comes back. I got to do that. Yeah, draining, draining, draining. But this way, it all can kind of uh, be constructive.
Oh, so draining. And I will say, and certainly not everything works for everybody, but I will say this is a technique that I employed in my own life about a year
Mm.
ago of scheduling time to worry. I tend on the anxious side, and game changer. And that may not be for
So
every
how did
anxious
you do it?
person.
Like, what was your exact pattern?
My exact pattern was no, you can't, like, so I'm, a person that thrives on rules. So no, this is
Yes.
not the time that you
Yes.
worry. That's
Mm-hmm.
against the rules.
Uh-huh.
And I
Yes.
set aside that time. And at first I needed it once a day, which was, I've slowly cut back my worrying, but
Mm.
I very much attribute it to this technique. And it's been so much more energizing because I did
Mm-hmm.
not realize what all of that constant worrying was doing to
Mm-hmm.
my energy levels.
Right. Right.
It
Right.
was
No, it's
crushing me.
draining. Yeah.
So, Last but not least, I know you've done a little bit of work in the past on what do you do for fun? Because one
Yes.
of the things that we always equate for happiness is like, well, you can't just work 40 hours a week and come home and plop on down on the couch and do dishes. Like, that's not a happy life. You got to have some things that you do for fun. And I
Yes.
know that you've explored your own little anecdotally, like, can I force a hobby on myself?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about your little experiment with the Knicks? And
Oh, yeah.
do you think people need to have a hobby in order? Should we all have hobbies? Is that part of our happiness trip?
Oh, interesting. Well, I always kind of have trouble with the word hobby because I feel like I don't know, I've never liked that word. So you could think of passion or interest or curiosity or hobby, whatever. I don't know that I don't that's a good question. Do I think that everybody needs a hobby? I'm gonna skip that because I need to I've never actually asked myself that, but it's a really good question. But I would say you're probably likely to be happier if you do have a hobby, interest, passion, curiosity that you're pursuing. Um, because one of the things that makes us happier is to have an atmosphere of growth. And an atmosphere of growth is where we feel like there's some place in our life where we're growing, where we're learning, where we're making things better, where we're teaching. And so having a hobby is a way to have an atmosphere of growth because you're like, oh, even if it's something like doing a puzzle, it's like, oh, I had this 1,500 piece puzzle and now I'm done. It gives you that feeling of like moving forward and making progress and doing things. And the more challenging something is, typically the more the feeling of growth that you get. So yeah, so what I do, what I call it, I'm calling it Operation Knicks Knowledge. So my husband got season tickets to the Knicks, and he said, because since a little kid, he's been a huge fan of the Knicks, and he said, okay, now you have to be interested in the Knicks. And I was like, yes, I've always wanted to see, can I make myself just interested in something by sheer force of will? Now, it is true that it isn't just me doing this. I'm kind of free writing off of my husband's enthusiasm and knowledge. Like I have somebody who's like very excited about the Knicks, knows all about the Knicks, knows all about basketball. So it makes it a lot easier. I'm not just doing this out of thin air and picking something randomly. Like this is really important to somebody who's like so close to me. So that gives me a leg up. That being said, I have been really excited by how much fun it is to learn about the Knicks. And part of what's fun about it is that other people are so excited for me. And I realize this is like for me as a huge reader, when I read a book that I love, I'm like, I want everybody to read it. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to buy Pure and Easy right now and start reading it tonight. And you won't go to bed until you finish it. And it's so good. Like you get so excited about sharing something that you love. And people are so excited for me to be interested in the Knicks. Like it's funny. Like I'll just randomly mention it to somebody who does not seem very interested in talking to me. And then they'll be so animated because they're really genuinely excited for me, and that makes it super fun. And it's fun to have a steep learning curve. And like there was a New Yorker cover called Garden Party, and it was a cartoon of players. And I went to my husband Jamie, and I'm like, I know that this is the Knicks. That's Jalen Brunson. I recognize him. You know, I was so excited. Whereas like 2 months before, I would have been like, are those real people? I don't know. Maybe they're just like random, just imaginary basketball players. I have no idea. I'm like, there's Carl Anthony Towns. So anyway, so it's given me this feeling of an atmosphere of growth. It's made me closer to somebody who's, you know, my husband, who's like super important to me. It's given me a way to connect with strangers or acquaintances. It's been super fun. So do I think everybody needs a hobby? I need to think about it. Do I think that for me, I can offer up the data point of one, the anecdata of my own? I'm like, it's so much fun.
I love that. I like, what's the drawback? What's the drawback? You're connecting better with your people, with strangers, and you're getting a kick out of this
Yes.
new, interesting, fun thing that you've learned. I mean, what would be the drawback? I think that taking more chances, because you previously were not a basketball
Right.
fan, I'm
But
assuming.
here's the potential drawback. Here's the potential drawback. The opportunity cost. Because maybe there's something that I would be more naturally interested in, and I should be using that time and energy on something that comes more naturally to me instead of allowing somebody else to dictate what I'm interested in. That's the potential drawback. And I think you have to go into it knowing I'm choosing to see if I can get interested in something that I'm not naturally interested in, but that is not the same thing as following your own natural inclinations. I think there's a place for both, but I think it was Jerry Seinfeld who said there's no such thing as fun for the whole family. And I think that sometimes people do gaslight themselves and like,
Yeah.
I love Disney World. I love camping. I love skiing. And it's like, you might do it because it's really important to other people, or maybe you get a kick out of it because you're like, it's fun to be part of it. But you always want to know, like, are you connecting to yourself or are you just going along? Because that's really important, because if what you're doing is everything is fun for somebody else and you're just sort of going through the motions, in the end, that's not gonna be very energizing for you. Like, I love the Knicks, but I have so many things that, like, I'm naturally doing. So this is adding. If this was all I had, I think it would be a little thin.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you vocalized that in such a way that I think is understandable. And I also think that maybe for somebody who's like, I don't have anything.
Right.
I think a lot of people are in a situation where they've gotten sort of in a routine of their life where they are
Yes.
realizing that they don't really have anything that they
So
do
here's
outside for fun.
Here's a good question to ask yourself. What did you do for fun when you were 10 years old? Because what you did for fun when you were 10 is probably something you would enjoy now. So like when I was 10, I called them blank books, and I would write books where I would copy down my favorite quotations. This is still something that I do as an adult all the time. And I love doing it just the way I love doing. Now, then I did it by hand in a book. Now I do it on a computer, but like I made a daily calendar of all my of like of some of my favorite quotations, and just like, and now it's for sale because I love writing down my favorite quotations. And my husband, what did my husband do when he was little? He was a rabid fan of the Knicks. He's like, he knows that Knicks era so well. And then for years, like he almost never went. And now he's like reconnecting with something that he loves. And so part of it, like, did you love walking through the woods with your dog? Did you love bike riding? Did you love making arts and crafts? Did you like taking photographs? Like something that you did as a 10-year-old is probably something that you could reconnect now in its adult form. I know somebody who's doing, I told him this, and then like 2 years later I saw him, he's like, I started doing baseball cards again. That's what I loved doing as a kid. And he's like, I just spent $2,000 on a baseball card by accident. I'm like, I don't know how that happens. And he's like, it's okay. It turns out it's a really good investment. I'm like, see, you're doing it as an adult now, right? Like, but it's still the fun of baseball cards. And he reconnected to that as a grown up.
Oh, I love that. I think we have so many ways to get started. And I know we started off by saying we're not going to define it, but I personally feel I have a much better understanding of what happiness means to me and to the people around me from having like identified, what their tendencies might be and how that relates to their happiness. So I feel like we have left with so many good jumping off points. You have been incredible. You have to tell our listeners where they can hear more from you because they're going to absolutely want everything you have.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, the name of my podcast is Happier with Gretchen Rubin, and it's a weekly podcast where I talk about how to be happier, healthier, more productive, more creative. Super fun, full of like hacks and strategies. I have a website, GretchenRubin.com, where that's a leaping off point. You can learn more about all my books about happiness, good habits, the five senses, human nature. I have a newsletter called Five Things Making Me Happy. That's super fun at GretchenRubin.com/newsletter, or you can sign up through my site. I'm on social media in all the places, Gretchen Rubin. No surprise. And I love to connect with people with like insights and resources and observations and questions. So like hit me up wherever. But for just about anything, if you just go to GretchenRubin.com, like everything is gathered. Plus I have tons of resources and more quizzes. If you love a self-knowledge quiz, there's the like, what if you're going to do one habit to make yourself happier, like what for you, not just generally, but for you, what is the habit that would would move the needle for you most? I've got a quiz about that. I got so many quizzes. Anyway, it's all GretchenRubin.com/quiz, or GretchenRubin.com, I should say.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. I think that this has just been the most insightful conversation about one of the things that people are constantly chasing. And really, this is going to make a big difference. And the work that you've done, I mean, invaluable to having people get closer to their happiest, healthiest self. So thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.